they're trying to be, at least, even if they're failing at it, they're trying to at least appear to be from that same lineage.
Well, what it actually says is that that you may attack and kill the polytheists, and it initially tries to make peace with the Christians and Jews, but then Muhammad quickly sees that the Christians and Jews actually don't want to accept him because he's kind of a lunatic.
And you could say
so what the Quran then says is that you may attack and subjugate the Jews and Christians and make them your subjects. So they are still to be fought.
I agree with that.
And they are still seen as not accepted.
But that's the same thing Christians doing, looking at the Jews and saying they don't accept Jesus. They're gonna,
Yes, but that again doesn't have much to do with the topic of Islam supposedly being an offshoot of Judeo-Christian religion. So, but I think this whole topic is kind of.
All right, we were done. What else did you want to go back and forth with?
I think we're basically done. So you can just concede that.
Let me just. I'm fine with ending. I'm fine with ending early. I'm not like too inspired to keep going. But let me,
do you agree that Islam is worse for society than Christianity?
Right now?
Yes. Thank you.
I didn't say it. You got something over there?
Yeah. I was just drawing something. So I just want to explain this very quickly here. So I said that that Islam developed its own religion out of polytheism, whereas Christianity came out of Judaism. So I try to make it very simple here. So you can see a menorah here. There's a menorah here. Then it goes over, and there is a Christian cross here. So from Judaism develops Christianity directly, and then it
right. But Christianity is developing from the Middle Platonic world that it's living in, which is pagan. So it is coming out of Judaism, but it's being influenced by the other.
But the first Christians, what were they? Were they Jewish or non-Jewish?
They were Jewish.
Yes.
And not all of them.
Thank you. So the first Christians were Jewish. The first Christians were Jewish. In fact, Jews themselves considered the first Christians to simply be Jewish heretics. That's what
they're still being inspired by.
Doesn't matter. Now let's compare this to Islam.
It does matter.
So
why does it not matter?
Here's Islam.
Why does it not matter?
Let me make the point. Here's Islam. Islam is represented by a sword here, and. Instead of originating from Judaism, it develops from its own place, goes and adopts things from Judaism and Christianity, but is still its own thing. It never developed out of Christianity or out of Judaism.
Why was Muhammad hanging out with
It does not have any origin in Judaism and Christianity. So Muhammad himself was a polytheistic Meccan dude whose family were polytheists. He was not of Jewish origin. He was neither of Christian origin.
Yeah, but he's not a polytheist after he becomes a Muslim.
Okay, but he was not.
But who is he inspired by? Who is he talking to? Nestorian monks? Persian Christians around him.
Look, here's the thing. If you wanted to make the case that Muhammad was a learned Christian man, for example, or that learned Christian people, for example, came together and developed a new sect of Christianity, which then developed into Islam, you could make that case. Then you could say, yes, it's an offshoot of Christianity. That was simply not the case. Muhammad was a guy who was possibly at some point influenced by some Christians, and then later by Jews, but it was still at its origin simply a polytheistic religion, which then adopted or syncretically took things from Jews and Christians.
I think you could make the same case about Middle Platonic philosophy adopting Jewish customs and sort of marrying what becomes Christianity.
No, that's not the same thing, because those people were Jews.
Not all of them, though. And I think that's beside the point, because there's no requirement for being Jewish to be a Christian. They sort of disregard that stuff.
Okay, but the topic here is that the Jews themselves.
So let me ask you
that Christians were Jews who then developed Christianity out of Judaism. With Islam, we can't make the same thing. With Islam, we can't say that it took things or it is based on Christianity or Judaism. It is some guy coming and taking from Jews and Christians. It doesn't develop from it. So you can't really make the same case.
I agree with the history, the development. I agree with that. But once you get the Quran, it's citing Mary, the birth of Jesus and Mary. It's citing Christian themes. Okay. And you and I have talked about this. Nestorian Christianity, this Eastern sort of Byzantine Christianity, the iconoclast type of Christianity that was around in the 7th century. I mean, you and I have discussed this, that there's heavily influencing Islam.
Sure. But when you say that that Islam is the way it is because of Christianity, because that's where it takes its teachings from, because it's an offshoot of Judeo-Christian religion, that is simply wrong. You can't make the case.
The customs of the Judeo-Christian culture.
Well, they're not. So,
can you show me a source that has marrying children in Arab paganism?
Unfortunately, the pre-Islamic pagan society was a very underdeveloped one. But
I agree.
But we can see, for example, in the early Islamic sources that they used to marry like tons of women freely and all that. So that apparently was reduced in Islam when Islam was introduced into only marrying up to 4 women, for example. Like there you have the polygamy aspect, for example. You have different instances of Muhammad marrying a child, Muhammad marrying his adopted son's wife, and so on. The society around him doesn't seem to object to much of what he does, except in that one case where he marries his adopted son's wife. There is a friction where people say, wait a minute, that is your daughter. How can you marry your own daughter? And he then conveniently brings a revelation from Allah. He's like, I'm getting a revelation right now. And then says that it was actually Allah who told himself to do that, upon which people calm down. But much of what Muhammad does is considered completely fine in his environment, in his culture, including punishing and killing people, apparently marrying children, which people didn't seem to object to, and so on. So you don't need to draw any of that from Christian or Jewish society. In fact, Christian society was significantly more morally advanced, compared to Islamic early society.
That's funny because the Quran singles out polytheists as people that you can attack, while Christians and Jews have a place in their paradise. You can't say that's some. They're trying to be, at least, even if they're failing at it, they're trying to at least appear to be from that same lineage.
Well, what it actually says is that that you may attack and kill the polytheists, and it initially tries to make peace with the Christians and Jews, but then Muhammad quickly sees that the Christians and Jews actually don't want to accept him because he's kind of a lunatic.
And you could say
so what the Quran then says is that you may attack and subjugate the Jews and Christians and make them your subjects. So they are still to be fought.
I agree with that.
And they are still seen as not accepted.
But that's the same thing Christians doing, looking at the Jews and saying they don't accept Jesus. They're going to,
Yes, but that again doesn't have much to do with the topic of Islam supposedly being an offshoot of Judeo-Christian religion. So, but I think this whole topic is kind of.
All right, we done. What else did you want to go back and forth with?
I think we're basically done. So you can just concede that.
Let me just. I'm fine with ending. I'm fine with ending early. I mean, I'm not like too inspired to keep going. But let me.
Do you agree that Islam is worse for society than Christianity?
Right now?
Yes. Thank you.
I didn't say it. All right, well, listen. Let me ask you. Last question. Let me ask you this. What did you ever come with any rebuttals about all the early Middle Ages, Golden Age stuff? You said the Renaissance and was it?
I want to give you a chance, AP, but I also do want to make sure, because last time we had a lot of questions that people wanted to ask, and I do want to make sure we get plenty of time for questions this time. And we're probably going to start the David Wood and Robert Spencer debate just a bit later, so 3:30 instead of 3:15. Nonetheless, we are going to have a shorter open dialogue. So I want to give you a chance to respond, AP, to what Neil just said.
That's the only thing I want to get into with you.
I think we can just finish the open dialogue at this point anyway.
So you don't have anything then?
Oh, wait, which one was it?
Golden Age.
Golden Age.
I mean, like I mentioned, the Christians took back Granada, and when they got there, they were like, what the hell is this place?
No, of course.
Running water, heated showers?
It is actually recorded that the Islamic society that took over the Iberian Peninsula did develop certain things and did take a lot of advantage from societies that were present there. Jews, for example, had a great impact in that society until the Muslims, as always, lost their cool and started killing them.
That's not what the sources say about Granada. That was completely built by Arabic Muslims.
Okay, but so it was a different society where
they built that from scratch.
It was a completely different society where they did indeed take advantage of the people living there and also live together and develop certain things. And it is undeniable that when the Spaniards or when the native Iberian people came back and reconquered the areas, they thought, hey, these places are quite developed. Let's keep it like that. So yeah,
like Alexandria, I'll give you that.
I can totally.
But Alexandria's built by pagans too.
I can totally concede that. But
you mentioned the Jews. There was parts in time in history where the Jews would prefer to live under Islamic rule than Christian rule because of their You disagree with that?
You can make lots of arguments for that. The issue with Islam is that what made Islam different from Christianity, from Christian society, and their stance on Jews is that Islam had a system in place, which is how Jews mostly could predict what the outcome of living in a Muslim society would be. They would pay the jizya, which is protection money. As long as they paid, they would normally be fine. Every century, however, there was an instance where Muslims would just lose their shit and then start killing them. And even in Granada, 1066, Granada was a massacre of Jews, for example.
And the Christians weren't friendly to the Jews either.
In that very same society. However, There's actually, Maimonides actually says something very interesting. Maimonides is one of the greatest Jewish leading figures, and he, living in that very same society in Iberian Spain, Muslim Spain, actually says in a letter where he writes to Yemenite Jews, he says about the Muslims that these people have treated us worse than any other people in history, and they are a curse upon us, and so on. So these are things that he actually says. So the Jews themselves, or Maimonides, for example, he didn't like Christianity. He didn't like how Christians handle things, but he said that the Muslims were always worse toward them than the Christians were. And of course, that is now debatable in history, but there is a reason why. And here's the thing as well. So Muslims have a system in place where Jews can live under their rule and do whatever the Muslims say, as long as they pay protection money and as long as the Muslims don't get the urge to kill them. But there is also the prophecy, which you I'm sure know about, which is that Muslims will, according to Muhammad's prophecy, they will fight the Jews, or it goes as follows. The hour will not come until the Muslims fight the Jews and the Muslims kill them, until the Jews hide behind rocks and trees, and even the rocks and trees will say, there is a Jew behind me, come and kill him, except for one tree, which is called the Karga tree, which is some magical Jew tree or something like that, I guess. So they have a place for Jews in society, but they always have in mind the idea that eventually they will be eradicated and so on. But
I don't think there's anything worse, though, than the Strasbourg massacre in 1349, where an entire community of several thousand Jews were publicly put to death, and starting in Toulon.
Look, I'm not going to argue that
it's straight from Christian anti-Semitism was the reason for it.
I'm not going to argue that Christians were great with Jews. Okay, I'm not going to make that point.
It says allegations of host desecration, blood libel, stuff like that.
I'm not going to make the point that Christians were great with Jews. It is very well known. There were instances where Jews were made to publicly declare or publicly engage in debates to then just find an excuse and start basically kicking them out and taking their belongings and so on. This is part of history and are things that we may acknowledge and leave behind in the past. I hope, but I'm not going to argue that Christianity is free from any of that stuff. I would say, however, that in Islam there is always the persisting idea that the non-believers, not just Jews, but also Christians and Jews and others, are to be subjected to protection money or else, and always to fight them and to make them listen to you or else. That is the position. There was something else that you wanted to argue with. What was
just the last thing? The idea of like petty crime and gang activity, obviously rampant all in the United States and South America and Mexico, not necessarily in Muslim majority countries. You don't find this there, and you can argue it's the fear of Allah that's making people not do these things. That's funny. Still good for society, though.
I'll give you a chance to respond, AP. This is the last one. Then we
okay,
go to Q&A.
You actually brought up Egypt as an example. Egypt actually has higher crime rates than many European countries. So it's kind of a...
Many European, not most.
But higher than Germany, for example, which is very interesting. But...
On average, though, I think.
I would say, honestly, just going to make this point here. I can't say what people should and should not do, why there is or is not crime. However, if most people became Muslims, the world would be a worse place. If most people became Christians, the world would be a better place.